So the Kiwi is back with the Canta, and this thing has a lot of detail, maybe even a little bit too much for some people, but it's got two planars, one dynamic driver, and yes, it does have some planar timbre, but it's in a good way. So while other companies have been shifting towards a tamer upper mids and treble tuning when it comes to like planars, to make it feel less planar-ish, KiwiEars on the other hand said, screw that, we're gonna do the total opposite and lean heavily into the planarness, which means you're either going to love the air and shimmer to these, or you're going to be a little bit turned off by the extra energy, because the CANTA'S does have a lot of treble air and detail, and depending on how loud you listen and your library, you're either going to love these or you're going to think they're doing too much, because they have one of the best detail and resolution under $100, and if you're a treble head, you're most likely going to like these. Cymbal strikes have that extra shimmer, sparkle, and extension and air in the decay, very splashy without being like too sharp and too peaky. Now, it's not going to be a high volume set because of the extra boosted treble, but if you listen at normal volumes, you're going to be fine. Although the Canta doesn't feel 100% natural when you compare it to a dynamic driver, for example, it's also not like bad in the sense of like the planar being too metallic-y, too sharp. It just has a different color and style to the sound, pretty like shimmery and on the smoother side of things rather than metallic-y. Now, some might find these to be a bit too much in the upper mids and the treble because the Canta does follow the Harman 3K, but it also boosts the 8 to 15K region. So in that sense, I do agree to a certain extent that on more energetic genres like K-pop, J-pop, EDM, stuff like that, it's gonna get a little bit fatiguing, a little bit too hot if you listen to it at like a higher volume. Like if you listen to like long session, it's just gonna get a little bit too much in the energy. Songs like Butterfly by Luna and Say It by Yorushika is gonna come off to be a little bit too bright and hot when it comes to the vocals and some of the instrumentations, so you're gonna need to turn them down to a lower volume if you don't want to like get too fatiguing and too hot. However, on slower tracks, this type of tuning actually works and is pretty enjoyable because of the 5K dip. Acoustics, indie, piano ballads, and non-electronic instrumentations sound airy, they sound sparkly without being like too hot and fatiguing, and it definitely brings a different vibe to the tracks. But the downside to the 5K dip is that you do miss some information in that 5 to 6K region. There is some masking when it comes to the consonants and some bluntness when it comes to the attack on certain instrumentations, as well as the vocals can feel a little bit incomplete near the end, although it's not too noticeable because the 3K is filled in, as well as the elevated treble from 8 to 15K afterwards brings back the air extension that was missing. So overall, unless you're like comparing it and A-Bing it back and forth with like a more quote-unquote traditional IEM, you're not gonna notice it too much. Separation on the other hand is great on the Cantas. These drivers are very quick when it comes to the transients, no like jumbling of the instruments and the vocals, and these definitely do favor the female vocals more. It gives some extra air and sparkle when it comes to the final extension while remaining not thin and not shrill sounding like the Oracle Mark IIs. That's pretty similar in the overall sound as the Cantas. Male artists on the other hand can sound a bit too light, soft, and a little bit weak. They're not the most powerful and heavy when it comes to the note weight. Low end is also similar. The bass is kind of light and it's tight, it's well controlled, and the bass is fast in its attack and its decay, but again, it's just a little bit soft, a little bit too light, but it does have very good separation when it comes to low end, zero bleeding, zero coloring into the mids. Like overall, the low end does the job. It's not going to be the most heaviest and thickest in its no weight and the slam, but the separation is good, it's very quick, and doesn't get in the way of the treble, which is what the main focus of the Cantas are. Now for some comparisons, versus the EW300, the Canta is brighter, it's going to be airier, but not like in the sharp kind of way like the EW200. It's got that shimmer, it's a bit smooth and sparkly, but without like the metallic-y and the peakiness from the EW200, or at least some units of the EW200 depending on unit variations. Vocals on the Cantas feel lighter with more shimmer to them, more air, whereas the EW300 feels like more, more traditional, more accurate in the note weight and the presentation, whether it's the red or the pink nozzles. The EW300 feels closer to you, whereas the Cantas feels more laid back. The details and the air in the treble is like more like spacious, I would say, and the separation, I would give it a slight edge to the Cantas, as well as the overall resolution and detail. However, the trade trade-off to this is that the CANTA'S does feel, you know, quote-unquote planar-ish in a good way. I wouldn't say it's like super sharp or like super like jarring or anything like that, but the EW300 will still sound more natural when it comes to the timbre, as well as having just like deeper and heavier slam when it comes to the low end, more natural male vocals, you know, thicker male vocals, and just overall I guess like better balance. And the EW300 would still be my pick when it comes to being in like all-rounder, whereas the CANTA'S would be more niche in its tuning and the demographic, because the CANTA is actually more similar to the EA500 LM, which is also like slightly bright depending on the unit variation, but the difference is the LM is more energetic and more in your face with the sound. It's heavier in the low end, the thickness is better, the body is like, it feels heavier, the slam, the impact is better in the low end on the LM, whereas the CANTA is, you know, it's more laid back, it's more airy, but still bright leaning. So if you want a bright leaning set with good bass, go for the LM, but if you want something that's, you know, more chill, more like airy, you don't really care for the bass, then the CANTA'S would be the better pick. And detail and resolution wise, they're around the same depending on the unit. If you get more treble on one or the other, and just like the overall timbre, the LM is going to be better in that regards. And versus some PLANARs like the T10, the F1 Pros, the PLANAR S12, stuff like that, the CANTA is going to have a very similar light timbre to them, but even more air and treble detail. Now it's definitely bright leaning, but I wouldn't say it's like stabbing like the, you know, early BAs from KZs. It's just brighter, but just more shimmery and more airy and a little bit more sizzly now. However, if you already found this planar to be like borderline too much when it comes to the treble, but you still want a planar, then, you know, you could go something for the S08, which would be the better pick when it comes to being like the least planar out of all of them. It does sound like the most natural out of all the planars so far, and it's a pretty smooth listen and pretty enjoyable and like a balanced set overall. Then versus the XUAN has a natural clean sound signature. It has a lot less air and, you know, treble, less sparkliness, less shimmer, less energy, safer overall, more natural, more balanced. And the CANTA, it's gonna be just brighter, more lively, and a little bit lighter and better when it comes to the treble and the detail. But if you want something clean and better in the timbre, then the XUAN would be better, whereas the CANTA would be like a more treble listen. And then versus some warmer sets like the Titan S2, the Magic 1, and the pink nozzles on both the regular EW300 and the DSP and the HBB version. HBB is the same thing as the regular stock one. So compared to those, the CANTA is gonna have better treble detail and air. It's more lively, the note weight is lighter, you know, it's better at mid volume, whereas the others are gonna scale better. It sounds more natural in the timbre, it's thicker in the low end and the male vocals. And if you want something better for rock and just like scaling, you would go for like the EW300 and the warmer sets, stuff like that. And then lastly, as for the Explorer, these two are complete polar opposites. The Explorer is a darker set that scales like crazy. You need to listen to it at higher volume. It's much more immersive, more personal. The staging is like more like wider, it's more horizontal, it wraps around you more, whereas the CANTA is a mid to volume set. The staging is more pushed back, it's more laid back, it's airier, it's brighter, and, you know, it has better detail and resolution when it comes to the treble overall. I would still take the Explorer because I just like the, you know, the timbre is better, as well as the immersion is better on the Explorer. It's more unique, but the CANTA is also a great pick if you want some like total opposite sound. But yeah, these are the CANTA'S, a welcome surprise, and even though it's not gonna float everyone's boat, I do still think they are a nice addition to like your collection, and it just stands out from the rest for better or for worse, right? But aside from that, I hope this review was helpful. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one. Shout out to Rarix Cat, Dom Q, Star Buccaneers, Discall Scaldus, B_URAC, Mystic Spoon Attack, Oh Really, Walker Standard, User Ernest, Patrick, Belcel Kel, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, Anton Risto, Giz Sing Yan, Tamat Pat Fache, Ed Dunlap, Christopher Jackson, Name, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Ben Thompson, Franco Gomez, Haigyu55, Asher, Wizard, Jab, Obi, iComment87, Contain Guava Juice Gains, and Treble Well Extended. Thank you guys so much.